Welcome to the Her Story Circle podcast, the podcast that brings you the extraordinary tales of everyday women who are changing the world. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Every week, we dive into the lives, challenges, and triumphs of women from all four corners of the globe. We're here to inspire, enlighten, and connect, sharing stories that uplift and empower. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and join us as we explore the incredible journeys of women shaping our future. This is Her Story, where every woman's voice matters. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story Circle. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating guest. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us today.
Hello, everybody. My name is Linda Drattell. I live in two places. 6 months in California in the San Francisco Bay Area and 6 months in Barcelona, Spain. I come from a family of four, my parents and my brother and myself. And I'm married. I have two grown children. One is turning 39 this month and the other is 35, who is about to be married, a son and a daughter. What can I tell you about myself? I grew up in Long Island, New York, and my children are adopted from Bogota, Colombia. And what prompted me to become a writer is that as we lived in Maryland, I found it very difficult to assimilate in our neighborhood as our children were considered different. And this was very difficult for us. They, in numerous settings, did not accept my children. And so I became extremely frustrated and I didn't know how to react. And as a result, I started a story, which I've now completed as a novel, which I hope to become published. And it's about a woman who is an immigrant who tries to get along in her nouveau riche, upwardly mobile neighborhood. And in the process of being rejected, she learns how to become accepted and builds a community around her. She becomes stronger every day. She has a vegetable garden that also becomes stronger and grows and outgrows her yard and her neighborhood, and to the dismay of her neighborhood, overcomes her community. While I'm waiting to get that book published, I discovered poetry, which I actually fell in love with when I was a child. And so in the process, I have published two poetry books. One is Remember This Day, and the other is The Lighter Side of Horse Manure. Remember This Day is more serious poetry about facing the crossroads in life. And The Lighter Side of Horse Manure is tongue-in-cheek poems that I wrote when my horse was aging and dying, and I realized he was facing the same obstacles that I'm facing as I'm getting older. And it was a way to just laugh at life. So those were two poetry books that I wrote. And I co-wrote a children's book called Who Wants to Be Friends with a Dragon? And this book is about a dragon who realizes he's different from everyone else. But because of that, he isolates himself and fears that no one would ever want to be his friend. But in the process, he meets a boy who accepts him exactly because of his differences and recognizes his skills to be assets. And he makes a friend for life. So that, of course, is as a result of my experience. Also because I became deaf in my 30s. And anyone who has lost their hearing isolates themselves. They're sure nobody could possibly want to be their friend. They don't go to parties, and they're afraid to join conversations because they know they will struggle understanding things. So this is my feelings as a dragon. And at the time I wanted to learn Spanish, and my Spanish tutor said to me, let's write a story about a dragon. And she said the dragon actually is her because she's half Mexican, and she felt that she didn't fit in anywhere. And then we found an illustrator who is the son of Filipino immigrants. And he said, no, that dragon is me because I feel different. And that's when we realized the dragon represented anybody who feels different for any reason, whether it's a difference of religion, disability, age, whatnot. So that's what we did, and it's been very successful.
Thank you so much, Linda, and thank you for coming online and sharing your story with us. What an incredible journey you've been on. Let's delve into maybe your poetry collections first, and delve into the themes of survival, empathy, and human connection. What inspired you to explore these themes in particular?
One was a photograph I saw of a tree that was struggling to remain upright, or I felt it was struggling against a raging river. And so I was 16 at the time, and I wrote a poem about it. And it's included in my poetry collection, Remember This Day. And one thing I realized that now is how my poetry touches other people, especially other women. So two women who have cancer told me that particular poem really impacted them. And one of them told me she brings that book with them when they go for cancer treatment because that poem inspired them to be strong. Another poem that I wrote, for example, was about the Nice terror attack in 2016. And that is because my husband and I were there, and we survived that attack. And it was a terrible, horrible, devastating attack. Over 400 people were injured and over 80 people were killed. And my husband and I happened to be eating in a restaurant just below where the truck struck everyone. And we ran and hid in the bathrooms. And it was 3 weeks after the Orlando attack. And we didn't know if we would make it out alive. And people were jumping off of the promenade, and one fell on top of me. And there's a really awful feeling that the survivor has. You know, why did I survive? And couldn't I give my life to someone else, someone younger? So I'm getting choked up here. You think of the kids that could have lived. And so what I found when I wrote that poem was it was very cathartic for me. And we had met two other people who had been in other terror attacks. It's amazing how large this group of people is. I met quite a few people who have been in terror attacks. And these two women said, go to a therapist, someone who specializes in post-traumatic stress disorder, because if you don't, it will stay with you the rest of your life. And so we did, and it was extremely helpful. And we learned about the pain of a second arrow. You get hit when the traumatic occurrence happens. You get hit with the first arrow. The second arrow, I think that's Buddhist philosophy. The second arrow occurs when you hit yourself with it because you keep remembering it and you keep dwelling on it. And so you incur the pain of the second arrow by doing that to yourself. So it teaches you not to do that. And it was helpful for me to put everything down in writing, because then I could walk away. I didn't feel the responsibility of having to remember, because if I wanted to, I could always look back at what I wrote and it would be there. And other things that I wrote about my horse aging. I had a horse that lived till he was 34, and I had him for 29 years. And there is something magical about owning an animal for that length of time. Some people, especially in the horse industry, if you don't get what you want out of the horse, then you sell them and you get another horse. But if you keep an animal to the end of its life, you learn so much from how he manages his own life. And it's the same as with people. So I wrote a poem about him and how he lived with dignity and how he ran after the younger horses in the field, cut corners sometimes to keep up with the herd, but that's okay. And my father-in-law really identified with that poem. And there was another one where there was this raging storm. It was an atmospheric river, they called it. And I think it was 5 feet of rain just crashed all at once onto the earth. And so I drove out to the farm to bring him in, and he was so reluctant to come into the barn. And I put him in a stall, and he was so angry. He's kicking and bucking and rearing, and I realized he didn't want to be confined. I mean, forget it. He wanted to be out there in the maelstrom. So I said, okay, fine. I brought him back out there, and he was happy as could be. And isn't it just like us? We don't want other people restraining us and confining us and telling us what's good for us. Sometimes we just want to decide that for ourselves. So it's those kinds of things that I wrote about.
What an incredible writing career you've had. And what's fascinating is how cathartic writing can be, especially in helping people to heal. It's like you take it out of your head, you put it between these pages, and you close that chapter of your life, and you can move on to live the rest of your life. So I have a question. How has becoming deaf influenced your writing style and the themes that you choose to explore in your poetry?
Well, when it comes to my animals, and I had 4 goats. When it comes to my animals, they didn't care that I was deaf, and I just wrote about them. Although I did write a poem about one goat, and that won 2nd place in the Writer's Digest International competition. And that was about not feeling a part of your herd. And so that had to do with my feeling deaf and how he accepted me no matter what. And so that influenced me. I did start writing about being deaf, and a number of those poems have been published in individual literary magazines. Mm-hmm. And there's going to be an anthology by deaf poets. And I just found out 5 of my poems are going to be included in that anthology later this year.
Wow, that is just amazing. Absolutely amazing and very inspiring. Now, can you describe the creative process behind Remember This Day and how you channeled your personal experiences into those poems?
I guess because I lived on 3 different continents, I felt that I was privy to a lot of unique situations, like, well, the situation in Nice, and I was also in London for 6 months because of my husband's work. And so I have one poem there, for example, about Paddington Park. And there I had gone for a walk with my dog, and I saw a man slumped on a park bench and realized that he had died. He wasn't asleep. And 2 police officers realized the same thing and rushed over to him. And what really got to me was the compassion of the police officers. And one sat next to him while the other went for help. And the fact that this police officer sat elbow to elbow with this man, and it was like a camaraderie and this heartfelt feeling. It just had to write about it. So I guess being in different situations, being in different places, combined with the fact that I was becoming more visual because of my being deaf, I just found that I was writing more about things I was seeing. Same with I enjoy running. And so I was running a lot through the parks in different places, and I was noticing more things visually. So I would write about them.
That's just incredible. They do say that when you lose one of your senses, the rest of the senses become more heightened and you rely on them more to navigate the world. So it's fascinating to hear you share that. Now, let's also go on to your book, The Lighter Side of Horse Manure. You explore humor amongst adversity. How did you find comedy in the challenges that you and your horse faced?
So my first poem and my last poem are serious in that book. And actually, they're all true stories, even the funny ones. I was determined to show that my horse still had value because the barn manager actually said those things to me in the first poem. She wanted me to put him down. He was losing a lot of weight, but it was because she had stopped feeding him. And when I realized that, I came out every day and I fed him and I turned him out and I cleaned his stall because she wasn't doing any of that. I would find him stuck in his stall and she was on her phone doing whatever. And it was so upsetting to me. And she would say, you see, he's losing weight. So when I started feeding him, he gained his weight back. And she got angry. And she just said, look, I have horses you can rent for $50 an hour. Why don't you just take one of those? You know, you can't even ride him. But this was a horse that I got him when he was 5 years old. And he was like a nasty teenager when I met him. He was biting everyone. He was nasty. But for some reason, we took one look at each other and fell in love. And he stopped biting, and we just became the best of friends. And this rowdy teenager became so sweet that I would put my daughter on him when she was little. I trusted him, and he was wonderful with them. He was wonderful with her. He was wonderful with my son. I remember one time my son got sent home from school because of bad behavior. And I thought, okay, what am I going to do? So instead of punishing him, I said, come on, let's go over to Vegas. I put him on Vegas, and he was laughing hysterically, and Vegas was wonderful with him. And then I took him off. I said, okay, let's talk about what happened at school today. And it was great. We had a good discussion. So this is a horse I laughed with, I cried with, who helped me through thick and thin. There was one time when I was riding him bareback, and we almost made it back to the barn, and something bit him, and he shifted his weight suddenly, and I fell off. Didn't run away. He stayed right next to me, and he lowered his head, and I thought I had broken something, and I couldn't stand. So he let me put my arm around his neck, and he helped me up, and we shuffled together back to the barn, and I managed to get over the phone with my arm around his neck. I dialed 911, and when I finished the call, I laid down on the ground, and he walked over to his stall and waited. I mean, this is an incredible horse. And so, I mean, how do you put a horse down like that? I would never. So I didn't put him down. My last poem is the sonnet where I finally did, and it was because he let me know it was time. It was 34, and he had refused to eat his grain, and he was so tired. He laid his head on my shoulder, and, you know, he just communicated to me, I can't do it anymore. So I said, okay.
What an experience, and what a bond that you had formed with this horse. That's just incredible. You've managed to transcend personal and societal challenges, like surviving a terror attack. How do these intense experiences shape your creative output?
With the experiences in the lighter side of horse manure, I was just determined to prove his worth, and it just came out in very funny poems. I just hung out there with him and his buddies, and they're funny. When horses get used to you, they just up their antics, and you hang out at the water trough, and they're all come up and they're standing and they're grunting and they're swaying, and you realize they're chatting with each other just like people do at the water cooler. And so I wrote a poem about that. And then I was mucking his stall one day, and he's giving me this look like, why are you doing that? I wouldn't do that. So I wrote a poem about that. And it was just a lot of little things that I wrote poems about. And each one got published, and I felt like, there, you see, Miss Barn Manager, he has work. Oh, wow. So that was my feelings about that.
Oh, I love it. You also are a mother and a wife. And as a mother to adopted children who face their own challenges, how has this aspect of your life influenced your writing and your storytelling? And just how did it affect all of you as a family?
Well, my husband is very understanding because it's like becoming a widower. But he's very, very supportive of me in my writing. I wrote two poems about my children, one about my son. He actually, his birth mother and birth family found him. So I wrote a poem about that, about how his birth family found him, all 153 of them.
Oh, wow.
That's a huge birth family. And they have a Facebook group. And he was like, Mom, I'm used to 2 people and 2 parents and 1 sister. I can't deal with this. It was just cracking me up. So I wrote a poem about that. And I wrote about my daughter because she became a professional dancer. And she somehow just reaches for the stars constantly. So I wrote a poem about her like a flower growing, and that she constantly needs the sunshine. And those 2 poems got published separately. So it's just that sort of thing. Now she is a teacher, and she's like, Mom, can't you write about being a teacher? So I'm trying to feel what it's like to be a teacher from a teacher's perspective. Because you've got to really, I guess when I write poetry, I write it because I feel emotionally involved. It's something that I want to say. And then what you say, if you feel it deep enough, it resonates with somebody else. Yeah. So I remember somebody asked, well, do I feel AI will take over poetry or creative writing? And I don't think so, because the AI doesn't feel emotionally what someone goes through and doesn't have your experiences. And that's what separates what a person can write and what AI can write. I guess my very first poem, The Torrent and the Tree, I really feel closest to that poem because I feel the tree didn't give up. And even in its dying moments, it's struggling, and it's the struggle that continues, and that the world is going to recognize it. And that struggle can reflect on anybody. It reflects on me as a person, or on you, or on Ukraine, or on any religious group or minority group that's struggling to survive and exist, and insist that it is a successful, recognizable group. I feel that that is the most important. If you like, I could recite that one.
Yes,
If we have time.
yes, we do have time. By all means.
I have to get my reading glasses.
Okay, I'm going to go into the background.
This is in Remember This Day, the torrent and the tree. Why does it struggle so? Its branches tremble and shiver against that which will inevitably overcome it. The biting rain flogs its leaves. The raw wind mauls its branches. The irate river, pulsing and rupturing the embankment, whips up slumbering silt and loosens the hold of its roots. Lawless rapids sweep around it triumphantly, dragging the tree to a slow, prostrate death. Yet it resists, as if sheer will can repel the forces which assault it. A few extra minutes of life, worth the agony. The tree twists and twines with a pluck it did not know it possessed. Its impaled soul refuses the sweet death that beckons. It seems to know why it is there. Its defined arms are streaked with rugged lines from splintering cracks. Its trunk scarred with raw nubs, where young branches fanning budding leaves once grasped the sky. As it sings to the will of the aggressor, the trembling forest bears witness, comprehends it is the tree which has overcome the torrential waters. Its measure, now resting in long overdue quietude, gazes gratefully at heaven, for not even death can erase those precious defiant moments it spent on earth. So that poem, I think, is what affected me and guided me most through life.
Wow. Absolutely beautiful. You are so gifted and so talented, and you've managed to carry this gift throughout all of the challenges that you've had. It's just incredible. So my last two questions are a bit of a thought experiment, Linda. And I am going to teleport you into the past. And we are going to go and sit with the younger you, the young woman who has gone through so much. I'm not even sure where to start. Let's start with you giving her advice when you were making a decision to adopt your children, you giving her advice when you were losing your hearing. If you could go back and give that younger woman 3 nuggets of wisdom based on what life has taught you up until this point, what would those 3 nuggets of wisdom be?
So the 3 nuggets of advice I would give to my younger self is that, yes, I will face adversity in my life, but with that adversity will come wisdom and will come opportunity. Doors will open that I will not expect, and that I should take advantage of those doors and not be afraid and just take chances. Not everyone will like the choices I make, but those are the choices for me to decide on. I don't know if those are 3 or not.
Yes, that's beautiful. Okay, now let's take you into the future. And we're going to teleport you to meet the 90-year-old you. And she is sitting in her rocking chair, surrounded by her children, her grandchildren, her dogs, her cats. Maybe she's on the dance floor with science and technology. Knowing you, you'll be dancing away. If we could take you into the future to have a conversation with the 90-year-old you, this amazing woman who has guided you all your life up until that point, what will you say to her when you finally meet her?
I will say, hey there, I'm so glad to see you haven't given up. You're still hiking, you're still going for runs, you're much slower than you used to be, but you're still doing it, and you're still writing. just keep at it, keep going. It's just another trip around the sun. Nothing has changed. Nothing needs to change. Just be yourself and keep going.
Absolutely beautiful. Linda, thank you so much for coming online and gracing us with your presence today. It is just amazing when I meet creative women who, despite all the challenges they go through, they harness all of that experience and put it out into the world through these creative pursuits. Thank you for being an example of what is possible when you don't give up on yourself. Thank you.
I want to thank you so much for this opportunity to be on your show. This is absolutely fantastic. And I love the questions you asked of me. Thank you so very much.
It's an absolute pleasure. And thank you to everybody who tuned in today. The Her Story Circle is not just a podcast. We are a social impact movement with a vision to share the stories of women from all over the world. We bring you the stories that uplift you, inspire you, energize you, but most importantly, that give you ideas and tools to take you from where you are now to where you're trying to go. So tune in again tomorrow when I interview yet another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world. And Linda, thanks again for the interview.
Thank you.
Bye for now, everybody. Thank you for tuning into the Her Story Circle podcast. I hope today's story has inspired you to believe in the power of our stories and the difference you can make in the world when you use your voice. I'm Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a rich tapestry of diverse perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these stories with more listeners. Follow us on social media by looking for the Her Story Circle podcast for more updates. And join us tomorrow for another episode filled with courage, resilience, and empowerment. Remember, your story matters, and together we're building a stronger, more inclusive world. Until next time, keep making her story.